All right, let's dive into the epic, turbulent, and just absolutely fascinating history of France. We're talking about a story of constant reinvention, from ancient tribes all the way to a modern global power.
You guessed it, France. But here's the thing, this isn't just the history of a place on a map. It's really the story of an idea that's constantly being challenged, broken, and then rebuilt from the ground up. It's a story of revolution that, you'll see, has in many ways never really ended.
So, to really get France, you have to go way, way back. I mean, before the kings, before the grand cathedrals, right down to the very bedrock of its identity. Let's start at the beginning, with the land the Romans knew as Gaul. And what a beginning it is. We're about to sprint through literally millennia. It all kicks off with some of the first human art ever found, deep inside the Lascaux caves. Then Greek traders set up shop on the coast, founding places like Marseille. But the real game changer? That's when the Romans show up. Julius Caesar's conquest brings in Latin, Roman laws, and roads, creating this unique Gallo-Roman culture. And when Rome eventually falls apart, it's these Germanic tribes, specifically the Franks, under a king named Clovis, who pick up the pieces. They lay the groundwork for what will become France, and later, a massive empire under the legendary Charlemagne.
And what's so cool is you can still see hints of this ancient past today. That little Celtic settlement, Lutetia Parisiorum, well, that was the tiny seed from which the entire city of Paris would eventually grow. History is literally buried right under the streets of the modern city. Now, in this early Frankish kingdom, there was this really bizarre power dynamic going on. You had the Merovingian kings who were, well, they were kings in name only. But the real players, the guys actually running the show, managing the money, and making all the big decisions, they were called the mayors of the palace. You can probably see where this is going. It was only a matter of time before one of them decided the title ought to match the job description. And that is exactly what happened, which led to a whole new dynasty, the Carolingians. And its greatest figure was, without a doubt, Charlemagne. I mean, this guy was crowned emperor by the Pope himself in the year 800. He wasn't just a king, he was an empire builder who brought a huge chunk of Western Europe together and basically revived the dream of Rome. But, as we know, empires rarely last forever. After Charlemagne, his kingdom fractured. And this next chapter, this is where France was truly tested. It was forged in the fires of invasion, disease, and a seemingly endless war that would define it for a century. This brings us to the Hundred Years' War, a brutal, century-long fight for the French throne against England. And it wasn't just one long war, but a series of absolutely devastating conflicts where English armies won victory after crushing victory, all on French soil. And just when you thought things couldn't get any worse, in 1348, the unimaginable happened. The Black Death swept across the country. This terrifying plague wiped out as much as half of the entire population. It's a level of devastation that's almost impossible for us to even wrap our heads around today. So by the early 1400s, France was on its knees. After a catastrophic defeat at the Battle of Agincourt, an English king was actually declared the rightful heir to the French throne. The kingdom was broken, demoralized, and teetering on the very edge of just disappearing altogether. And then, out of nowhere, a miracle. A teenage peasant girl, Joan of Arc, shows up saying she's guided by divine visions. And somehow she becomes the turning point. She inspires the defeated French army, she lifts the siege of Orleans, and she leads the true French heir to his coronation. Now, she was eventually captured and executed, but her martyrdom became the rally cry the nation needed to finally drive the English out for good. Okay, so with the English gone, France starts to consolidate its power, which leads straight into an era of absolute monarchy. It's an age that would be defined by one man, a king who truly believed that he was the state. 72 years. Just think about that. That's how long Louis XIV, the Sun King, was on a throne. He was the ultimate absolute monarch. He centralized all power in himself and built the incredible Palace of Versailles, not just as a home, but as this glittering stage to show off his unrivaled power and to keep his nobles in check. But all that spectacle and glory came at a steep price. The Sun King's constant wars completely drained the treasury, racking up a mountain of debt. And then he made a fateful decision. In 1685, he outlawed Protestantism. This caused hundreds of thousands of skilled workers, the Huguenots, to flee the country.
It was a massive, self-inflicted wound to the French economy. The seeds of revolution were officially being planted. And that brings us to a huge question. On the surface, France was at the absolute height of its power. It was the cultural and political center of Europe. So how on earth did it all go so wrong so unbelievably fast? What could possibly cause a nation at its peak to just completely combust? Well, the answer was revolution, a pure explosion of anger, hope, and incredible violence that didn't just topple a king. It was meant to remake society from the ground up. And its shockwaves would be felt across the entire globe. It all happened with breathtaking speed. First, the king is bankrupt and out of ideas, so he calls a big meeting. It totally backfires. Then the people of Paris storm the Bastille prison, this huge symbol of royal power. Before you know it, the monarchy is gone, the king is executed by guillotine, and France is a republic. But then things spiral into the reign of terror, where even the revolutionaries themselves start getting sent to their deaths. And out of all this bloody chaos rose one of history's most brilliant and ambitious figures, a young general named Napoleon Bonaparte. He seizes power in a coup, basically ends the revolution, and then in the most stunning move of all, he crowns himself emperor, turning the brand new republic into a brand new empire. For about a decade, Napoleon's armies basically conquered most of Europe, completely redrawing the map of the continent. But in the end, his ambition was his own undoing. After a disastrous invasion of Russia, a coalition of European powers finally defeated him for good at the legendary Battle of Waterloo in 1815. So the age of Napoleon was over, but France's instability was far from it. The next century and a half would be this dizzying cycle of monarchy, revolution, and republic, all leading into the devastation of the modern age. And the pace of change just keeps accelerating. A crushing defeat in a war with Prussia in 1870 gives birth to the Third Republic. Just a few decades later, France goes through the unimaginable slaughter of World War I, a victory that left it completely bled dry. That's followed by the national trauma of defeat and Nazi occupation in World War II. In the aftermath, with all the instability, war hero Charles de Gaulle establishes the strong Fifth Republic that exists today, a republic that would eventually tie its destiny to Europe by adopting the euro. So what is France today? Well, it's a proud republic with an identity that's forever been shaped by those famous ideals: liberty, equality, fraternity. It's a cornerstone of the European Union, a key member of NATO, and yeah, still a massive cultural force on the world stage. And that brings us to our final big question. We've just seen a nation whose entire history is this constant arc of upheaval and transformation. From Gaul to kingdom, kingdom to empire, empire to republic, it has never, ever stood still. So the question isn't if France will change again, but how. What will the next chapter of its unfinished revolution actually look like?